The ghost of yesterday. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Sterling's penthouse office, each drop a tiny percussion against the glass that separated him from the world 40 stories below. He barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the holographic displays floating before him, stock prices and market projections dancing in blue light as his latest acquisition sent ripples through the tech world. At 35, Marcus had built Sterling Dynamics from nothing, a empire worth $12 billion that started in a cramped studio apartment with nothing but code, coffee, and an almost pathological drive to succeed. The boy who'd grown up in foster homes, who'd been told he'd never amount to anything, now controlled algorithms that influenced global commerce. Success was his armor, and isolation was his crown. The intercom's soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Sterling, there's a Detective Rivera here to see you. She says it's urgent and personal." Marcus frowned. Personal matters were extinct in his carefully curated world. Send her in. Detective Rivera was a compact woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a manila folder clutched against her chest. She looked around the sterile office, all chrome and glass. No photographs, no personal touches, before settling into the chair across from his desk. "Mr. Sterling, this is about Olivia Chun. Does that name mean anything to you?" The name hit him like a physical blow. Olivia. Sweet, fierce Olivia with her paint-stained fingers, and dreams of changing the world through art. The woman who'd shared his cramped apartment 10 years ago, who'd believed in him when he was nobody, who'd vanished one night, leaving only a note saying she needed space. "I knew her," he said carefully, "a long time ago." Detective Rivera opened the folder. "She listed you as the father of her children. Twins, Zoe and Ben, age 9. Miss Chun has been missing for 3 weeks." The words seemed to echo in the vast office. Children, his children. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the wall he built around his heart. "That's impossible," he whispered, but even as he said it, he was doing the math. 10 years since Olivia left, 9-year-old twins. The children are currently in emergency foster care. They've been asking for their mother. Detective Rivera's voice softened. "Mr. Sterling, they look just like you." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the back of his Tesla, watching Queens blur past the windows. The foster home was a modest 2-story house with a small garden where plastic toys lay, scattered like colorful confetti on wet grass. Everything about it felt foreign to him, the ordinariness, the lived-in warmth emanating from behind drawn curtains. Mrs. Patterson, the foster coordinator, met them at the door. She was a grandmother figure with silver hair and knowing eyes that seemed to see straight through his expensive suit to the scared boy underneath. "They're in the living room," she said quietly. "Be gentle. They've been through enough." Marcus stepped into the room and felt his world tilt. 2 children sat on a worn couch, a girl with dark curls reading to a boy with Marcus's own stubborn cowlick. They looked up as he entered, and he saw himself staring back, his gray eyes, his sharp cheekbones, softened by something he'd never possessed at their age. Hope. "Are you our dad?" the girl asked simply. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came. In all his boardroom negotiations, he'd never faced a question that mattered this much. Part 2. Cracked foundations. The Sterling Dynamics boardroom had hosted hostile takeovers, billion-dollar mergers, and cutthroat negotiations that reshaped entire industries. It had never hosted a tea party. Marcus sat rigidly in his leather chair, watching 9-year-old Zoe arrange plastic cups with the precision of a diplomat. Ben had claimed the head at the table, building an elaborate fortress from Marcus's pristine legal folders while humming tunelessly. 3 days had passed since their first meeting, and Marcus had insisted on bringing them to his office while Mrs. Patterson handled paperwork. "You're doing it wrong," Zoe informed him as he awkwardly held a tiny plastic teacup. "You have to extend your pinky. Mom taught us proper etiquette." The mention of Olivia sent that familiar jolt through his chest. "Where did you learn that word? Etiquette? Mom has lots of books. She reads to us every night." Ben looked up from his folder fortress. "She says reading makes your imagination bigger than any building." Marcus glanced out at the Manhattan skyline, his concrete and steel kingdom stretching to the horizon. He'd built this empire believing size mattered, that bigger meant better. Now a 9-year-old was suggesting otherwise. "Mr. Sterling?" Dr. Williams, the child psychologist Mrs. Patterson had insisted he consult, entered the boardroom with barely concealed amusement at the scene. "Might I have a word?" In the hallway, Dr. Williams studied Marcus with the same analytical intensity. He applied to market data. They're remarkably well adjusted, considering their circumstances. Olivia clearly provided a stable, loving environment. Then why did she disappear? The question escaped before Marcus could stop it, raw and desperate. That's what we need to find out. But right now, those children need consistency. They need someone who shows up, not just someone who provides. Back in the boardroom, chaos had erupted. Paint, or had they gotten paint? Covered half the conference table. Zoe was creating what appeared to be a mural, while Ben narrated an epic story about dragons and brave knights. Marcus's quarterly reports were now casualties of war, decorated with handprints and rainbow streaks. "What is this?" Marcus's voice came out sharper than intended. Both children froze. Zoe's face crumpled slightly. "We were making it beautiful, like Mom does." Something twisted in Marcus's chest as he saw his own childhood reflected in there suddenly. Fearful faces, the moment when adult anger crashed down like a wave, washing away joy. He remembered foster parents who cared more about clean surfaces than children's hearts. He knelt beside them, ruining his $1,000 suit as his knee hit a puddle of green paint. "Tell me about the dragons," he said quietly. Ben's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" For the next hour, Marcus learned about brave Princess Zoe, who rescued villages with her magic paintbrush, and Knight Ben, who befriended dragons instead of fighting them. He discovered that his daughter had their mother's artistic soul and his own analytical mind, while his son possessed a gentleness Marcus had never known how to nurture. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Marcus found himself on the floor, his suit jacket abandoned, watching Ben show him how to build the perfect folder tower while Zoe painted their portraits, a family of stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. "Do you think Mom will come back?" Zoe asked suddenly, her paintbrush hovering over the paper. Marcus thought of 10 years ago, of Olivia leaving that note. He'd been so consumed with his startup, so convinced that nothing mattered except success, that he'd barely looked up when she tried to talk to him about their future. He'd dismissed her fears, her dreams, her love, everything that hadn't fit into his narrow vision of achievement. "I'm going to find her," he promised, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. That night, alone in his sterile penthouse, Marcus stared at the children's artwork now hanging on his refrigerator. First personal item in his home in years. The stick figure family smiled back at him, and for the first time since building his empire, Marcus wondered if he'd been constructing the wrong kind of legacy all along. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I need you to find someone," he said, "and I need her found now." The search within, the private investigator's office smelled of stale coffee and old leather, a stark contrast to the sanitized world Marcus usually inhabited. James Knox was everything Marcus wasn't, rumpled, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much of humanity's darker corners. He spread photos across his cluttered desk like a dealer shuffling cards. Olivia Chun, 28, artist and part-time gallery assistant, Knox began, his gravelly voice cutting through the morning stillness. Last known address was a studio apartment in Brooklyn. Neighbors say she kept to herself, devoted to her kids. Then 3 weeks ago, nothing. No credit card activity, no phone pings, no trace. Marcus studied the photographs. Olivia at a school play, laughing as Zoe took a bow. Olivia helping Ben with homework at their tiny kitchen table. Olivia painting. On a fire escape, while the twins played below. In every image, she looked tired but radiant, surrounded by the warm chaos of motherhood he'd never learned to appreciate. There's something else, Knox continued. Financial records show she's been struggling. Behind on rent, working 3 jobs. But here's the interesting part. She never tried to contact you. No paternity suits, no requests for support. Whatever. Her reasons for disappearing, money wasn't the motivation. The guilt hit Marcus like a physical weight. While he'd been building his fortune, she'd been raising their children alone, too proud or too hurt to ask for help from the man who'd once dismissed her concerns about their future. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. Ben has a fever, asking for you. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the foster home's small kitchen, awkwardly preparing soup while Ben lay curled on the couch, flushed and listless. Zoe hovered protectively beside her brother, her small hand, smoothing his hair. Mom makes special sick soup, she informed Marcus critically, with stars and magic words. I don't know about magic words, Marcus admitted, feeling helplessly out of his depth. You just have to mean them, Ben whispered, his voice hoarse. Mom says that's what makes them work. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly neighbor who'd been helping. Mrs. Patterson watched Marcus with sharp, knowing eyes. First time playing nurse? First time playing anything parental, Marcus confessed. She smiled, stirring something that smelled like comfort itself on the stove. Children don't need perfect parents, Mr. Sterling. They need present ones. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself drawn into the simple rhythms of caregiving. He read stories with different voices for each character, discovered that Ben liked. His forehead rubbed in small circles, and learned that Zoe worried constantly about everyone she loved. When Ben's fever broke that evening, the relief Marcus felt was more intense than any business victory he'd ever experienced. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus sat in the foster home's small garden, his laptop balanced on his knees as he worked by porch light. For the first time in years, the stock reports and market analyses felt secondary to something more important. His phone rang. Knox. I found something, the investigator said without preamble. 3 weeks ago, Olivia was in a car accident about 2 hours upstate. Single vehicle, rural road. She was taken to Millbrook General, but here's the thing she was registered under. A different name, Jane Doe. No ID found at the scene. Marcus's blood ran cold. Is she ... alive, but in long-term care. Traumatic brain injury, memory issues. The hospital's been trying to identify her for weeks. Through the window, Marcus could see Zoe's and Ben's sleeping forms in the living room, curled together on the fold-out couch, like puppies seeking warmth. They'd been waiting for their mother while she lay in a hospital bed, lost and alone, unable to remember her own name. I'm driving up there tonight, Marcus said. Mr. Sterling, wait until morning. She's been there 3 weeks, a few more hours. Won't matter. But Marcus was already moving, driven by a desperate need to undo the years of absence, to finally be the person his family needed him to be. He paused at the living room doorway, watching his children sleep. Zoe's arm was thrown protectively across Ben's shoulders, and even in sleep, her face carried the weight of responsibility no 9-year-old should bear. I'm going to bring your mom home, he whispered into the darkness. As he drove through the night toward Millbrook General, Marcus realized he wasn't just searching for Olivia anymore. He was searching for the man he might have been, should have been 10 years ago. The man who chose love over ambition, Presence over profit. Connection over control. The highway stretched ahead like a promise, and for the first time in a decade, Marcus Sterling was driving towards something that mattered more than money. Awakening. The fluorescent lights of Millbrook General hummed overhead like mechanical prayers as Marcus walked down the sterile corridor, his footsteps echoing against polished linoleum. Room 314. The number had been burned into his memory since Knox's call 12 hours ago. Dr. Mitchell, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, intercepted him at the nurse's station. "Mr. Sterling? I'm glad you came. Before you see her, there are things you need to understand." They sat in a small consultation room that smelled of antiseptic and hope. "The accident caused significant trauma," Dr. Mitchell explained gently. "Olivia, we've been calling her Jane, has been drifting in and out of consciousness. Her memory is fragmented. Some days she remembers her name, other days she doesn't recognize her own reflection. But she recover?" Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Memory is complex. The brain heals at its own pace." Dr. Mitchell studied him carefully. "She's mentioned children in her lucid moments. Keeps asking for Zoe and Ben. Are those our children? Twins. They're 9. The words felt strange on his tongue, claiming them after years of absence. Room 314 was filled with afternoon sunlight streaming through gauze curtains. Olivia lay propped against pillows, her dark hair shorter. Then he remembered, shot through with premature silver. She was sketching in a pad with shaking hands, the same concentrated expression he'd fallen in love with a decade ago. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment, recognition flickered in her dark eyes. "Marcus?" Her voice was paper-thin, uncertain. He pulled a chair beside her bed, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. "I'm here, Lev. I'm finally here." "The children," she whispered urgently, her grip surprisingly strong. "Where are Zoe and Ben? I can't. I keep losing pieces of them. I remember bedtime stories and scraped knees, but then they fade like smoke. They're safe. They're beautiful, Lev. They have your heart and your strength." Marcus's voice broke. "They've been taking care of each other, just like you taught them." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I tried to call you when they were born. Did you know that? I stood outside your building with my phone, but I could see you through the window. You were in some meeting, so intense, so important. I realized I was. Just another interruption." The words hit him like physical blows. I was an idiot. A selfish, blind idiot who thought success meant more than love. "I wanted them to have a father who chose them," Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger with memory. "Not one who saw them as obstacles. So I left. I thought maybe someday you'd grow up and come looking for us." "It took me 10 years and a social worker's call," Marcus admitted. "But I'm here now, not just for you, but for them. I want to learn how to be their father." Over the next few hours, Marcus sat beside Olivia's bed as fragments of their shared past surfaced and submerged like pieces of a broken mirror catching light. She remembered their first apartment, how he'd coded through the night while she painted. She remembered the morning she'd tried to tell him about her pregnancy, and how he'd dismissed her with barely a glance, too focused on a client call to see her tears. "Do they hate me?" Marcus asked as the sun began to set. "For not being there?" "They don't know how to hate," Olivia said softly. "I made sure of that. I told them their father was brilliant and driven, that someday he might find his way back to us. I never wanted them to carry anger like baggage." Dr. Mitchell appeared in the doorway. "Visiting hours are ending, but there's a family here asking about Jane, a little girl and boy with a woman named Mrs. Patterson." Marcus's heart leaped. They came. Moments later, Zoe and Ben burst into the room with Mrs. Patterson close behind. The reunion was a tangle of tears and laughter, small arms wrapping around their mother while she sobbed into their hair. "We knew you'd come back," Ben whispered against her shoulder. "Dad said he'd find you." "Dad?" Olivia looked at Marcus over their children's heads, something shifting in her expression. "He reads us stories," Zoe reported seriously. "Not as good as you, but he's learning. And he doesn't know how to make pancakes, but he tries really hard. He bought us art supplies," Ben added. "The good kind, like you use." Marcus watched his family surrounded by the golden light of late afternoon, and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. Not the sharp crack he'd experienced in his office, but something deeper. A foundation settling into place after years of unstable ground. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly to Olivia. "I don't deserve it, but I want to earn it. However long it takes." Olivia studied him with eyes that held both pain and possibility. "They need their father," she said finally. "The question is, are you ready to be him?" As he looked at Zoe curled against her mother's side and Ben holding both their hands, Marcus realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was ready to build something that couldn't be measured in dollars or market share, something that could only be measured in bedtime stories. Scraped knees and the fierce, fragile trust of children who still believed in second chances. Building tomorrow. 6 months later, the penthouse that had once been Marcus's sterile fortress bore the cheerful scars of family life. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator, books sprouted from every surface, and a half-finished blanket fort dominated the living room. The sleek chrome table now served as headquarters for homework battles and art projects, its surface permanently marked with the evidence of childhood. Marcus sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding flashcards while Ben practiced spelling words. Across the room, Olivia helped Zoe with a science project about solar systems, her movements still careful, but growing stronger each day. The rehabilitation had been slow. Some memories had returned like old friends, while others remained locked away. But the important things, the love that bound them together, had never been forgotten. "Earth," Ben pronounced carefully. E-R-H. "Perfect," Marcus said, genuinely proud of the small victory. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have understood how a correctly spelled word could feel more significant than a successful IPO. Dr. Green, their family therapist, had warned them that healing wouldn't be linear. "Trust," she'd said during one of their weekly sessions, "isn't rebuilt in boardrooms or through grand gestures. It's built in moments, small, consistent choices to show up." Marcus had been showing up to parent-teacher conferences where he learned that Zoe had her mother's artistic talent and his analytical mind, to Ben's soccer games where he cheered from the sidelines, his expensive suits gradually replaced by comfortable jeans, to late-night conversations with Olivia where they carefully navigated the wreckage of their past while tentatively building something new. "Dad, look!" Zoe held up her project, a paper-match model of Jupiter, with careful attention to the swirling storms. "Mom helped me with the colors, but I did the math for the proportions myself. It's incredible," Marcus said, and meant it. "You know, Sterling Dynamics has a space research division. Maybe someday you could—" "Marcus," Olivia interrupted gently, a smile playing at her lips. "Let her be 9. He caught himself, remembering Dr. Green's advice about projecting his ambitions onto his children. "You're right. It's incredible because you made it, not because of what it might lead to." That evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus and Olivia sat on the balcony overlooking the city. The Manhattan skyline glittered below them, but Marcus found himself watching Olivia's profile instead, the way the light caught the silver threads in her hair, evidence of struggles he'd missed, strength he'd failed to support. "I've been thinking about the future," Olivia said quietly. "The doctors say I'm well enough to look for my own place." The kids need stability, and this arrangement was always temporary. Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the fear of loss that had driven so many of his business decisions. But this time, instead of trying to control the outcome, he simply listened. "I've also been thinking," she continued, "about what Dr. Green said, about how families aren't built overnight, how trust has to be earned in small moments. And I've been watching you with them, really watching." She turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the city lights. "You're not the same man who was too busy to look up from his laptop when I needed you. You're learning how to be present." "I'm trying," Marcus said. "Every day, I'm trying to be the father they deserve, the man you deserved 10 years ago." "I don't want the man from 10 years ago," Olivia said softly. "That man was a boy, playing at being an adult. I want the man you're becoming, the one who builds blanket forts and reads bedtime, stories with different voices for every character." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city breathe below them. "I'd like to try," Olivia said finally. "Not going back to what we were, but building something new, something real." "What does that look like?" Marcus asked, hardly daring to hope. "It looks like family dinners, without business calls interrupting. It looks like you teaching Zoe about problem solving and me teaching Ben about art. It looks like you figuring out how to be partners in raising these amazing humans we created." Marcus reached for her hand, the same paint-stained fingers he'd once dismissed as impractical. "I'd like that too, more than anything." 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning that smelled of pancakes and possibility, Marcus found himself in Central Park with his family. Not for a photo opportunity or a business function, but simply because Zoe wanted to paint the autumn leaves, and Ben wanted to feed the ducks. He sat on a bench watching his children chase pigeons while Olivia captured their joy in watercolors. His phone buzzed with messages from his office market updates, meeting requests, the endless demands of empire. He glanced at them briefly, then tucked the phone away unanswered. "No regrets?" Olivia asked, nodding toward his pocket. Marcus looked at his children, their laughter echoing across the park like music. He thought about the man he'd been driven, successful, and utterly alone. Then he looked at the man he was becoming, still ambitious, but ambitious for different things now. For Zoe's confidence when she presented her art, for Ben's gentle strength when he comforted a friend, for quiet Sunday mornings and bedtime stories and the simple miracle of being chosen every day by the people who mattered most. No regrets. He said, and meant it completely, because the afternoon sun filtered through autumn leaves, painting everything in gold. Marcus Sterling finally understood that the greatest fortune he'd ever built wasn't measured in dollars or market dominance. It was measured in trust, in laughter, in the small hands that reached for his without hesitation, and in the woman who'd given him a second chance to build a legacy that would outlast any corporation, a family bound not by blood alone, but by the daily choice to love, to show up, and to build tomorrow together.